Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane Watson, Felicia Hardy, Carly Cooper, all Spider-Man love interests, but what if I told you there was actually someone else? There was actually another Spider-Man love interest that is really interesting that not many people, including maybe yourself, have ever heard of. But what makes this new love interest as perfect as the title suggests? Let's talk about it. But before we get into that, I want to just announce we're so close to 30,000 subscribers, so if you love Spider-Man content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I would love if we could hit that goal this year. That would be absolutely awesome. But with that said, let's get straight to this. So some of you will have heard of this character, some of you won't. Of course, I'm talking about Sophia Sandoval, also known as Chat. They are a character that appears in Marvel Adventures universe, which is a separate universe from the classic 616. She was introduced in issue 53 of the Adventures of Spider-Man series, and essentially she is a mutant who can communicate with animals. She originally would use her powers for greed and gain when she fell into the wrong crowd and became friends with Emma Frost, another mutant with telepathy abilities. This is when they both ended up getting saved by Peter from a falling sign. Curious as to who Peter actually was and how he was managed to save them, Emma looked into his mind to find out that Peter was in fact Spider-Man. She went through all his past trauma and found out everything that happened with Uncle Ben and everything that led up to him becoming Spider-Man in the first place. Emma became annoyed that Peter would rather use his powers for good rather than for greed, whereas Chat ended up admiring Peter's nobility to do the right thing when he could easily use his powers for his own gain. And well, the rest is history. Peter and Chat ended up dating, and that's pretty much the rest of the series from there, until it unfortunately got binned off a few years later. Now, why does this relationship actually trump pretty much all the other relationships that we've had in Spider-Man comics as of recently? Well, there are three main factors to this. Number one, Chat's powers enable their relationship rather than hinder it. So many times throughout Spider-Man comics and adaptations have Peter's love interest held back the story. Not because they're not powerful or strong, no, nothing like that, but most of the time when you have to write two competent characters that can both hold their own for long term, and one has superpowers and the other is just a regular civilian, writers tend to end up becoming lazy. Like, for example, how many stories have we seen with the likes of Mary Jane Watson, Carly Cooper, Gwen Stacy, where they all revert to stories about them basically not being able to handle Peter being Spider-Man? Like, the weight of responsibility of Peter being Spider-Man is too much for them characters to handle, and that ends up splitting the relationship or creating some sort of divide. And I always feel like this comes from the fact that when writers can't find anything more interesting to do with the love interests or the relationship between them and Peter, they always end up reverting back to this same story or some kind of story that's very similar to it. However, the fact that Chat actually has superpowers opens up a whole different level of storytelling to be utilized. Personally, I think this is a solid part of the reason as to why so many people wanted Peter to end up with Kitty Pryde in the Ultimate Universe, because the same sort of dynamic probably would have occurred. Chat allows her and Peter to bounce off each other really well because she also has superpowers, and that's an extra layer of relatability that they can be with each other on. It's never just Peter running around to save Chat because she's the girlfriend. No, Chat actually holds her own, and that's really interesting. And people will say, Mary Jane has powers in the new comics, and what about Black Cat? Yes, those characters do exist, but stories with those characters, especially Black Cat, have been never really executed nearly as well. Plus, those characters represent something completely different. Black Cat represents the idea that Spider-Man is the only thing that matters, not Peter Parker, and that whole shift of identity, and Mary Jane was already a great character with great stories before she got superpowers. Her powers were completely unnecessary. But Chat was designed this way on purpose, and these stories are being told for this purpose. And I think it works really well because it's fresh, it's new, and it's really interesting. When you've read the same story a million times over, like we mentioned earlier, this becomes quite interesting actually. Number two, they actually stay together. Now, I'd argue to some degree this is the most important point on this list. The reason why Chat and Peter's relationship works so well is because they actually stay together for the entire series. One issue that Spider-Man comics have, especially the 616 universe, is that Spider-Man's love life is constantly a revolving door. And yes, it makes sense because when you have a comic that has been going on for 60 years plus, you're bound to want to spice it up from time to time, or else the audience will just switch off. But it's got to the point that basically every other run, or even inside of runs themselves, every other couple of issues, Peter changes girlfriend, or he breaks up with someone, or he gets with someone new. It's just tiring. The most recent example of this is Peter getting back together with Mary Jane in Nick Spencer's run, which, by the way, Nick Spencer's run spends most of its time building up a story as to why MJ and Peter being together is so important, to then just break them up again in Zeb Wells' run, which, I mean, Doesn't make any sense. And a subsection to this point as well, in Wells's run, Peter ends up dating Black Cat for a few issues, as he wants to actually make it work. Yeah, I don't know what that means either. They do this only for them to break up a few issues later. Literally, I'm gonna be honest with you, this relationship that happened in Zeb Wells' run meant nothing. Literally meant nothing. There was no reason for them to be together, there was no reason for them to break up, and we didn't even really spend much time with them together as a couple. They just kind of hung out as Black Cat and Spider-Man. However, contrary to what the 616 comics are doing, Adventures of Spider-Man actually kept Peter and Chat together, willing to build upon their relationship and tell complex stories with them, which I really liked. And this now brings me on to my third and final point. Number 3, they are actually happy. Peter Parker is not happy in his relationships. Whether they die, they don't trust him, he's always ditching, the significant other doesn't understand the weight of responsibility or something, Peter Parker is never happy in his relationships, no matter who he's with. And that's a fact. Or at least it's always seemed this way, especially in recent comics. However, in this book, Chat and Peter seem very content. Yeah, they have disagreements, as any couple would, but they genuinely seem happy for one another and act like a real, life, loving relationship. You often think that with the amount of pain that Peter goes through in his relationships in Spider-Man comic books, that he just stopped dating altogether. Like, I don't know why he hasn't yet. Well, the thing with Chat is that that's not the case. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Peter is allowed to be happy. And if you want to watch my video on why I think Spider-Man should stop suffering, click the icon at the top of the screen. There, I don't know, it'll be somewhere, it's in one of the icons, just go watch it. Apart from that, Chat is a great character, and you definitely should go read some of these stories if you haven't already. Either way, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you are new around here, because we're so close to 30,000 subscribers. I would love if we could hit that goal this year. That would be absolutely awesome. And with that said, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, and peace.